also have Blessed Soga SP, who says that chicken live soup is akoko soup. And we've also been joined by the Honourable Minister for Communications, the Honourable MP for Ningo Pram as well, here on the show. Good morning, Sam George. How are you?
Morning, Kojo. I'm hanging in there.
These days it's difficult when I ask people how are you, but
Extremely.
we were taught to ask how are you, so forgive me.
His grace and mercies abound.
Sure. And, moving on, as we all know, the difficult times that we find ourselves in, let's do it this way, because we've been talking this morning about coverage of disasters. And later on, we'll delve into even more into the media's coverage. But generally, from where you sit, because we saw the Ministry of Communications and Digital Innovation sending messages, warning people to actually think about their families. What's your own assessment of how, as a people, we treated this whole accident?
Let me say a very good morning to our listeners and those watching us via stream, and express my deepest condolences to the country and everyone. I think that this is the first time I'm speaking to the media since last week Wednesday. It's surreal that I get to speak about the individuals who I personally knew in the past tense and refer to them as a distant memory. It doesn't feel real. I mean, my relationship with Edward Omani Boama is one that is very public and very deeply personal for me. Comrade Mutala has been a colleague in the struggle and a comrade at arms, and we've always been together. Uncle Samuel Sapong, for me, it was, he was Samuel Sapong, smooth, calm, always a reassuring father figure in the party. And every time you spoke with him, Abuaji, I met after the election. In fact, on the 9th of the 6th and 7th, he came to Parliament with a request, came to personally see me to see if we could intervene to stop the MPP candidate from being sworn in. There was a very high-level conversation about whether to do that, whether that would disrupt the entire process and all, and we had to reach a conversation. And since then, we've been in constant conversation until he was appointed to the NADMO Deputy Director General role. Alhaji Limuna, from his time as Minister for Agric and all, had been a big figure, and anyone who was close to the John family would always realize that he was a fixture in the house every time he went there. And so, these are people who I personally knew and had relationships with, and so it's extremely tough talking about them in the past. When it comes to the coverage, generally, I'd say that it's been a mixed bag for me. And let me say a very big thank you to the telecom companies, MTN, Telecel, and Airtel Tigo, or AT Ghana. When the incident happened, I was distraught, but we still had a responsibility to the state. I got a call with the videos that started circulating. The unfortunate situation is most of them were circulating on WhatsApp. And WhatsApp is a platform that is not controlled by any country. It's a private business. I was faced as Minister for Communications with two options. One was to shut down the internet in the country to prevent further spread of the videos. Because don't forget that at that time, you had not had government officially complete communications with the families. Government had not made a formal communication. You had some of the kids who are old enough being online. I was worried about the mental health of those kids and the spouses, and such tragedy needs to be broken in a certain way. And I thought that the insensitivity, and so that was one option, to shut down, make a public announcement and say we're turning off the internet for a period to allow for calm to prevail and have a grip of everything before we allowed. But then that also would come with its own consequences. Many of you stream the news. How do people get the news via stream and all of that? So you could have a ripple effect that would actually be worse than what you were trying to fix. And so we had to leave that intact, and immediately reach out to, I had the cybersecurity authority immediately reach out to Meta, and activate a POC that we had there to see what Meta could do, because Meta owns the WhatsApp platform. And then I started making personal calls to senior vice presidents that I knew at Meta to see what could be done. They assured me they were going to look into the matter. And then I reached out to the NCA and asked them to get in touch with all the CEOs. I personally placed calls to the 3 CEOs and said they should work with the NCA. We sent out about 30 million text messages within the space of 2 hours, and the telecom companies bore the cost for this. So all those messages that went out from the MOCDTI asking people to please exercise restraint, cost was borne by the telecom companies themselves as part of working with us too, and the NCA coordinated the blast of the messages across the country. I think that as a people we have an expectation of the media to inform us and to entertain us and educate us, and the media tried to play its role. Right now the media is dual streamed, social and traditional. I had cause to call a few traditional media house CEOs and say to them, can you please take off certain footage that was being shown? I'm sure that those who follow the early footage or reportage will realize that some of the videos that we complained about on social media, on WhatsApp, that were being circulated were actually streamed live by media houses. And I thought that was unfortunate. And I think that that's against the ethics of the profession. As journalists, you need to balance the breaking of news with the privacy of the victims of that news, especially when it has to do with grief. And so I think that there are lessons, critical lessons we have to learn from here. I think that the media did a good job of keeping the nation abreast, allowing us to communicate the steps as they went. You being our trusted allies and partners as we communicate to the country the steps that were being taken, the DNA tests that were being done outside, the service of memorial and reflections. I mean, you being our trusted allies, we couldn't have carried the nation along. The ceremonial guarding programs, and so we're extremely grateful to the media. However, I think that there are critical lessons we have to learn from here in the way that we some of the footage that was put out. I think that it's critical we learn. And the last point I'll just make is this is not far-fetched. We see from across the world several similar instances, and I dare challenge anybody in the media to show me an instance where, in the case of Kobe Bryant or the Access Bank CEO or recently Diogo Jota, it's not that the media in those countries didn't have access to footage from the crash sites or accident sites, but they had respect for the families, the kids, the wives, those who have lost the people. There's a certain sensitivity that I think needs to come back to our country, and so I think we'll work with the media on that. And
talking about working with the media, beg your pardon, before I get to working with the media, let's look at, you've referenced the GJA's code of conduct, ethics and all of that. This is for the GJA. Is the ministry looking at legislating, putting laws in place to ensure that going forward these things are checked?
Well, the ministry is currently we're working on 15 new pieces of legislation, and so one of them, 15, it's the first time. In fact, when I told the Attorney General that I needed support from his ministry, he actually said, what's wrong with you?
15?
Yes, I'm working on 15 legislation at the same time. I'm redoing the electronic, in fact, look, as minister, one of the things I'm going to leave that ministry with is a legacy of future-proofing that ministry. Because when I took over the reins of the ministry in February, I realized that most of the legislation in a technology ministry were 18 years old. Some were 23 years old. They are not fit for purpose. The current state of Ghana's legislative framework for our technology sector is best placed in the Ghanaian Museum and not in the Ministry of Science and Communication, Digital Technology and Innovations. And so we're redoing the entire legislative framework and future-proofing it, because you have a Data Protection Act, for example, that was passed in 2012. In 2012, there was nothing called artificial intelligence. that was active. And so your Data Protection Act is blind to the nuances of AI. You've got an Electronic Communications Act that was passed in 2008. And so these are some of the things I'm dealing with. Electronic Transaction Act, so 15 new pieces of legislation. And in the Electronic Communications Act that we're dealing with now, and we're decoupling that, we're having the NCA's Act standalone and the Electronic Communications Act. This gives us a very good segue to be able to deal with all of that, because we're still in the process of finalizing the legislation. And so this is ample time enough for us to ensure that we do not try to censure the media's ability to publish, but we'll be able to set parameters that say that let's not cross. And we're going to be taking a lot of inspiration from the GJA's own Code of Ethics. So the way the Code of Ethics speaks about respect for grieving families and intrusion into the privacy of people who are grieving, we would literally, because at times in legislation you pick directly from the Constitution in the Constitution's own words and put it in the legislation. I think that's what we're going to do relative to when it comes to anything that we're going to be using to guide the broadcast. And this is pending the completion of the broadcasting bill as well.
Okay.
That will go into further detail. But I think in the Electronic Communications Act, we can pick bits and pieces from the GJA's own Code of Ethics. So it's not a government directive. Mm-hmm. Basically, the government is codifying in law positions that the GJA itself has established as Code of Ethics for journalists.
But I was just going to point you to that constitutional hurdle that you would face in terms of censorship and what challenge it will pose for your attempt to do regulation. For instance, you can't control Meta entirely, but yes, they're operating in our space. How are you dealing with that fix of regulation and trying as much as possible not to move into the dangerous line of censorship? That's a challenge for you, isn't it?
It is, and we're fully minded about it. And take, for example, with Meta. Meta has a content moderation team in country. As soon as we reached out to them, the footage was not just shown or circulated on WhatsApp.
Right.
It was also done on Instagram and Facebook. On Instagram and Facebook, a lot of that content has been removed. If you go online today on Meta, on Facebook and Instagram, you will hardly see the footage that we're talking about of child remains burning and all. Almost all of it has been taken off. That's work we've done with Meta. However, when it comes to WhatsApp, the policy of Meta was that they would not be able to block encrypted conversations between two people because it's end to end, and that for them they had you realize that they've changed their policy. At first you could actually just send a video to hundreds of people in your contact. Now you can send to a maximum of I think 5 at a time, and it has to be people you are encrypted end to end with and all of that. I think that at a policy level, when we meet at international fora, we're still going to pick that up with the platform operators and say to them that, look, there are issues like this where the platform should be able to say that, look, we're taking this off, whether it's encrypted or not, we will block this. It ought to be possible. But like I keep saying, we will work not in isolation, but with best practices. So we're working with platform operators when it comes to Ghana and our local legislation and what we can enforce. For example, when it comes to our local media, we will do that using the GJA's own ethics.
Right.
We'll work within the framework of what the GJA itself and you as journalists have agreed is acceptable norms. When it comes to the platforms, we will continue to work with them. Like I said, we've taken off a lot of that footage and flagged the footage, so it's not being able to post
But
again.
closely tied to that will be beyond mainstream media and what you would want to call the bloggers and those in the new media.
Yeah.
You have mobile penetration, as I was pointing out earlier this morning, more than double the population of the country. So you have a wider population to deal with. There's going to be a political cost because you're an MP. Obviously, you know what that means when you want to tighten regulation for many people out there who are holding mobile or smart devices. So based on that, how do you deal with the general population who may not be aware of ethics or may not necessarily be mindful of that while posting some of these images?
So it's the good thing is there's an association of bloggers. Not everyone who's a blogger belongs to it, but at least there is some kind of formality around them. We engaged them when we were working on the data price conversation, and so we're going to continue engaging with that group. For example, when I met with TikTok, and TikTok is supposed to come back and do some kind of monetization training for bloggers, it brings them under a certain umbrella. We'll continue to engage them, because you see, they may be bloggers, they may not be officially part of GJA, but so long as you're blogging, so long as you are in that media space, you're a content creator, you must be minded about, it's not a wild west. You must be minded that if traditional media has its boundaries set by the GJA's code of ethics, they apply to you as well. You understand me? And so we're going to continue dealing with them. We don't want, and I will be very clear, I will not get to the place where we'll begin to censor people's accounts and demand takedown of accounts and all of that. Those are tools in the toolkit available to government agencies and regulators. But I think that we don't need to get there. I think that we can work together with these content creators to sensitize them enough. I mean, ignorance is no excuse. However, there is abundant evidence that there's a lot of ignorance, because there are many people who, when you actually engage and ask, why did you do this? They're like, oh, I didn't know that it was a problem. I just posted it. You see, it's this rush to be the first to post. Okay, and I think that we need to strike the fine balance.
And talking about striking that fine balance would lead me to efforts at public education. Is the ministry considering this? Because you've talked about ignorance. How do you get people to know these things?
Well, I think that this is more collaborative between myself and my brother Felix, who is the Minister for Government Communications. You know, I keep saying that the lines are a bit blurred between both ministries. Normally, when you don't have the information ministry standalone, my ministry literally in the past has assumed responsibility for the whole gamut of agencies, and this time it doesn't happen that way. It hasn't happened that way. You've got a few of the, you've got the regulatory part with me, but you've got the media-facing institutions with my brother Felix. So ISD, for example, which will be a tool to be used for a lot of the sensitization, falls under Felix's ministry, the Ministry of Government Communication. So like I said, it's going to be a collaborative work, because as regulators, we have a responsibility to act. And off air before we came in, I was telling you about a video that was brought to my attention of a TV station in a part of the country that put a 17-year-old minor talking about a sexual abuse that she had gone through for 10 years without taking into consideration protecting her. Now, I would ask the regulator to clamp down, because you see, again, we need to have our institutions work. The National Media Commission must be told to sit up and work. You see, when as Minister for Communication, I see some of these things and I try to act using the NCA, then you have people come and say, Sam George is acting in excess of his powers. This is content, and this content is NMC forte. It's not the NCA's forte. What people fail to realize is that, yes, content is the forte of the NMC. The NMC has the constitutional mandate to review content. But that content is streamed using a national resource, Spectrum, which we regulate at the NCA under the ministry. Now, when we give you a frequency authorization, and you can check with your frequency authorizations here, there's a clause in every frequency authorization that the NCA reserves the right to suspend or revoke your license authorization in the interest of national security and public safety. So when a media house puts a 17-year-old minor who has been abused sexually for 10 years, meaning from when she was 7 years, without taking the requisite steps to even protect her identity, and puts in the same room with her the person who has been abusing her and turns it into public comedy, my colleague gender minister will act to protect the rights of that minor. But I would also act to take that media house off air. Because you see, it's about public safety. It is, and that's why I've said that very soon. I mean, we've done some work with the telecom companies. We're dealing with DSTv at the moment. The next one is going to be a proper cleanup of the media space.
When you say proper cleanup, what do you mean?
Yeah. So if you are engaged in showing things that are inimical to public safety, we'll serve you a warning. If you fail to heed with it, we'll withdraw your license. I'll suspend licenses of media houses that do not take into consideration the right things. Look, my brother, we have a responsibility to our children in this country. You remember the issue in Kaswa?
Yeah.
It was simply because kids were exposed, primetime TV, to money rituals. A ritualist asking people to bring body parts, bring a human head, and he'll make you rich. 10-year-old and 11-year-old. They killed their own friend. Why should we expose our children to such content? You see sexually explicit material being aired on some TV stations as early as 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. That's not why we gave you the license authorization. That's not information, that's not education, that's not entertainment. That's an abuse of our children. Abuse of the innocence of our children. And so we would work with the NMC, we will work with the GG, and I'll tell you what. Take for example the 62, 64 media houses that I suspended, and the president intervened and said grant them amnesty. If you realize, the Media Foundation for West Africa did not speak against that action. GIBA did not speak against that action. In fact, when they spoke, they asked all media houses to comply with the terms of their license authorization. Because I took my time and met the Media Foundation for West Africa and did a full presentation to them. Did same to GIBA. Showed them each media house and what the infraction was. Showed them evidence of letters. Some of those media houses, the letters came from as far back as 2022. Joe Anoche wrote letters. So I showed them every media house, we had a docket. So people realized that I didn't just wake up and say I was hand picking people and so that's why. So we'll be meticulous about it.
Just the Honorable Sam George.
Yes.
Quick one. I mean, you're talking about the internet, Honorable, and someone has asked a question. Just question on our internet space. Explicit content easily available and accessible by minors. And the person is asking, what are you doing about that? Because there are reports of some young ones already addicted to pornography. And if you go to certain countries like Saudi Arabia, even music with such explicit themes aren't accessible. What are we doing about that?
So we're going to have a stakeholder engagement, because you see, and that's one thing, people have accused me of having too many meetings. As minister, I believe that my job is to build consensus and carrying the country along. And so you realize that almost everything I have executed as minister, my industry players have come along without, maybe with the exception of MultiChoice. Every other person has come along and followed, because I make a case. I lay my case out and explain to you why I need you to support me. And I want to do same on this matter, because again, I keep saying that there are several tools in the toolkit. We can block certain URLs, even though that in itself, if you're tech savvy, does not automatically, it's not 100% fix. But what it does is it reduces access to some of those URLs. And the countries where you go to and you can't access, even Western countries, where for you to access you need to show proof that you're 18 years and above. We need to get to those places where as a country we begin to take, we need to begin to take public protection and consumer protection very seriously. And I believe that as a ministry that's digital and that regulates the digital space, a lot of this content now is digital, and so we have a responsibility as regulators, in the absence of a formal consumer protection agency, to act in the interest of our consumers. And so if you followed my engagement with TikTok, for example, which is one of the big platforms for young people, I was very, very clear and particular about content moderation. I was very, very specific to them that I wanted content moderation in country. I wanted them to look at the algorithms and what the algorithms could do. Because, look, if you understand how the platforms work, the platform owners have a certain control. The same platform working in China, the algorithms and the way they are structured for China is different from the way they are structured for us. We have a challenge of the size of our market. When you make some of these demands from the big platform players, you're seen as a very small market. But But what I keep doing is I don't just come in from a regulatory perspective and say, do this. I have engagements and explain to the platform operators what our national position is, who we are, and the fact that this platforms, yes, we may be a small market, but so long as you operate here, your community policies must take into cognizance our local nuances, cultures, and norms, and that these are things that as Ghanaians we do not want our children to be exposed to. And so we would work with you to make sure that we have those put in place.
But talking about multi-choice, I wasn't going to ask that, but once you mentioned the multi-choice, I've seen the NCA writing to them. If nothing changes from the the NCA's letter to them, what are the options available?
Well, I made it clear when I did my accountability series that if they did not come to us with a reduction for the Ghanaian people, I had made a request for 30%. If they did not do that, I was going to trigger the suspension.
30% or nothing less?
That's my ask, 30%. And there's a reason behind the 30%. Some people have said, oh, why don't you do 10%, 15%? In April this year, MultiChoice increased their prices by 15% in April this year. At that time, the CD had appreciated by about 10% against the dollar. What was the reason for MultiChoice's increases over the last 8 years? Depreciation of the CD, high interest rates, instability of the currency. As at April this year that they did a 15% increase, we had stability of the currency and appreciation of the currency. We had dropping inflation rates. The macroeconomic indicators were looking better. So there was absolutely no justification for that 15%. So I'm reversing that 15% and then demanding a further 15% for the Ghanaian people. So,
and this is non-negotiable.
They have said to me that they have a position that says we are not going to drop by even 1 cent. And I've said to them, and you see, my advice to businesses is don't fight your regulator. You can't fight a regulator and win. I have taken steps, and you see, when I say that I have engaged, I've gone as far as speaking to the South African Minister for ICT, Suli Matlasi, to speak to them. But MultiChoice is taking a recalcitrant position because they think, and it's wrong calculation, that the Ghanaian people will turn on Sam George because of the EPL. But you see, as a regulator, we have a responsibility where there is a monopoly to act in the interest of the people. And this behavior is not the first time. In 2023, in Malawi, the ministry there, in fact, in that case, they just shut them down, asked them to leave because the prices were exorbitant. MultiChoice went to court, sued the government, went to court, lost the case, and 4 months later came back, offered 1 week free for every subscriber, and dropped the prices. In Liberia, in 2023 as well, there was a similar agitation. They slashed the premium package by $30 and the lower packages by $17. In Nigeria, in 2024, they announced an increase. In Nigeria, they have a consumer protection agency. They went to court, sued MultiChoice, and got the court to rule against MultiChoice. And the Nigerian House of Reps passed an instruction prohibiting the increases in Nigeria. Ghanaians must know that as minister, my fidelity is to them. MultiChoice is not interested in dealing with all the critical issues, the issues of cross-border piracy on their platform. Starlink is an international company. We had instances where people were bringing Starlink devices from other African countries into Ghana to operate. We called Starlink and said we won't allow that to happen. Because you see, there are revenue lines as well for the state on devices that are located in the country. So if you bring a device from outside the country and it's working, it means that it is blind to the Ghanaian state. So now I said to DSTv, deal with cross-border piracy, and they tell me that, well, it's not something they can do. It's not. They think they are trying to do what they can do, but they can't. But what that is doing, when people talk about the size of the market in Nigeria and the size of the market here, about 40 to 45% of DSTv devices in Ghana today are all devices from Nigeria. So when you say you have a low subscription in Ghana, it's because your prices are not uniform and has led to cross-border piracy on your platform, and the Ghanaian state is losing, but MultiChoice is not worried because they are making the money. As a regulator,
Yeah.
we invited them. We invoked the powers of the ECA. When they reached out to my superiors and said they wanted engagement, and I said, but I've engaged you. Because people think I just woke up and did
When you
it.
say they reached out to your superiors,
They reached out to my
your
superiors.
superiors. About you. Okay.
I said to them, I engaged you in June. The Ghanaian ownership of MultiChoice. I engaged you. Made the point. And you made the point to me that the decision rested with your headquarters. I invited your headquarters, met them with the Ghanaian leadership, made my case to them. They asked me for about 16 days to make a decision. I granted that. In 16 days, they wrote me a 9-page letter with 6 graphs and bar charts explaining to me the instability of Ghana's economy and how our cedi appreciation cannot be trusted to be sustainable.
Oh, okay.
And then I wrote back to them and asked them, since when did MultiChoice become an economic forecasting institution? Yes, their license in Ghana is not to forecast economy. And I sent them links from the IMF, links from Fitch, and links from Standard & Poor's on the future outlook of Ghana's economy. And said that I would take a future forecast on our economy from those institutions and not from MultiChoice. And on the basis of that, I gave them up to the 7th to come back to me with something. And when I made that announcement, they rather wrote to my regulator. They wrote to the NCA that the NCA should write to them confirming that the NCA would not comply with my directive as minister.
Oh, okay. I see.
Look, the disrespect that has been shown, I have just kept my calm. You write to my regulator. You don't copy me. Asking my regulator to write to you on my blind side, giving you assurance that they would disregard a policy direction from the ministry. Then the regulator writes to you and says, okay, the minister has asked us on the basis of the Electronic Communications Act for you to submit data, and it's in their regulations, in the license authorization we gave to them. We asked them to submit specific data, and we gave them 24 hours to submit the data. Now the data we asked was simple. Show us the cost breakdown of every bouquet you are offering in Ghana. Show us the taxes and all of that cost breakdown, and show us the comparison with 6 other African countries that we spelled out.
Okay.
Don't you think that that's information MultiChoice should have at the thumb of their fingers?
Sure.
They wrote back to us and said they needed 7 days to provide that information. So the law says that when the regulator asks for information and you cannot provide it, every day you fail to provide it, we should fine you 10,000 Ghana cedis. That's what the law says. But because Sam George is a church elder, I'm a good person. Sometimes.
Okay.
I asked the NCA to waive the fine. So I granted them the extension
Are you not causing
and
financial
waived the
loss to
fine.
the state by
Oh,
waiving that
the
fine?
law gives me discretionary power to waive the fine.
Okay.
So I have expressed that discretionary power in favor of MultiChoice, even though they have not shown us any sign of goodwill. We've extended it for them.
But,
however, they have 30 days.
30 days.
Yes.
They're going to be taken over by, is it Canal Plus?
Yeah.
Yes, Canal Plus has gotten the all clear from the Competition Commission in South Africa.
Okay.
I believe that should kick in sometime in September. Yes. And so
How does that affect this whole, discussion?
Canal Plus are the ones taking over. They are aware of the situation going on here. And I've made it clear to them. They've reached out.
They've reached out to
yeah,
you?
they have. And I've made it clear to them, if they want to come into Ghana and operate on the license that the company they are buying has, this is our request. I want them, they've made certain indications, and I've said to them, I want it in writing. I don't want to take public policy decisions on the basis of phone calls that have been made to me. Put it in an official letter.
When they reached out to you, were they willing to reduce the prices?
Canal Plus is willing to talk to us. I would not run away from the fact that Canal Plus's attitude is light years more positive than that of MultiChoice. MultiChoice seems to be just wanting to cash out, because they're about to leave. But you've cashed out enough in Ghana.
I was going to point you to a statement from the minority side. You've seen that there seemed to be a bipartisan support on, in one breath, but on the second leg, they feel that fairness, that's the word they use, that fairness must apply so you don't affect investor confidence. They also hinted that there was going to be some committee level engagements in Parliament. You're a member of that committee as well, I believe. You are no longer on the communications committee. Yes. But of course, they were giving some
I'm aware
hints
we're
about
supposed
that.
to meet.
Yeah.
Because the
have they
leadership,
invited you? Have they spoken to you about that?
I made it clear that the regulator would attend that meeting. So the NCA was supposed
So you wouldn't want to engage Parliament on that?
No. I'm engaging Parliament through the regulator. The regulator is the one who has. And you see, people say, "Oh, but why didn't you just shut them down in 30 days?" The law is clear. The Electronic Communications Act stipulates, and it's because of the consumer. If I shut them down on the 7th, there are people who have running bouquets, active subscriptions for the month. You understand me? But in 30 days, it gives time for all of those bouquets to wind down, and then so that there's no hurt to a consumer in that period. And in 30 days, if they act in line with our request and come to us with a reduction, we would reverse the 30-day countdown. But it's 30 days from the 7th of September of August.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be on the 6th of September. On the 6th of September, we'll enforce it.
Yeah, but are you going to engage Parliament on the concerns about fairness, which they've raised?
I believe that the regulator has done that. And I've given you the timeline. There's nothing fairer than me having had meetings with them, laid out our claims. And I think that fairness is on both sides. You can't expect me to act fairly and not expect same of MultiChoice, DSTv. They must also act fairly. When you write, people read the one-page letter that came public, and people were offended. And I said to people, then you should imagine what's in the 9. If one page offended you, imagine what 9 pages was in that 9 pages. But listen, for me, I'm focused on making sure that we get the best value for the Ghanaian people. They should come to the table. Look, all the places they are walking around, getting the foreign minister of South Africa to call the Ghanaian foreign minister to call me, it's not going to work.
Oh, okay. They're getting people to call you.
Look, making it a foreign affairs issue and saying that there are South African businesses. The biggest South African business in Ghana is MTN. Has MTN complained about this? When I dealt with MTN worked with me in everything. I made the case. When I made the case to MTN, I want more data for the Ghanaian people. They said, well, we have a challenge with the network. We want more spectrum. I yielded. I went to cabinet and got cabinet approval and gave them more spectrum. So you work with your regulator in the interest of your customers and in the interest of your business. Okay. You don't place your business interest as the only interest you have and ignore completely the consumer interest. I mean, like I keep saying, the Ghanaian people are very hospitable people. Well, our environment is very entrenched, but I saw something that made my heart weep. Someone said, if you want to make maximum profit on the African continent and fleece the African people, Ghana is your best investment destination.
Really? George, decisive action to be taken this week. What's that?
I'm sure by lunchtime today, the announcement will be made from my ministry.
From your ministry?
Yeah.
In relation to what specifically? I see you don't want to give details, but what is it about? Don't say it.
The NCA will make an announcement by lunchtime today.
Some entities to lose their license?
The NCA will make an announcement by lunchtime today.
Okay.
And you would understand when the announcement is made how it dovetails into some of the conversations we had today.
Okay.
Because Kofi, when I saw that post, I really thought it was about Galamsey, because you've been one of the key people who have spoken strongly about Galamsey. In the previous government, you pushed hard for the government to end Galamsey because you thought it's something that could be ended, because we had all the intelligence to end it. We have a new government, 6 months into government. Galamsey is still going strong. And in fact, last week we were all heartbroken because the disaster that happened really happened because the sons of Ghana who were traveling were going to work on something that would have helped us deal with the issues in this space. Where do you stand now with the fight against Galamsey?
Kojo, my belief and resolve on the fight against Galamsey is the strongest it's ever been. I lost my big brother, Kofi Omani-Boama, and the 7 other sons of our land because of Galamsey. And I think that the least we can do in their memory is to wage an all-out war on Galamsey. If there was anybody who was passionate about this fight, it was Omani. Omani has refused to sit on helicopters or planes since he became defense minister. This was literally one or two, the first or the second time only he agreed to sit on a heli. It tells you how passionate he was about this, because it was about Galamsey. He lost his life going to fight it. And you need to speak to the lands minister. He'll tell you the plans Omani had. As communications minister, Omani had given me an assignment on the fight against Galamsey. He was using conventional and technology as his solution to it. And I believe that the legacy of this government, it will be a disservice to the memory of our colleagues if we do not take decisive action on Galamsey. We didn't with the loss of Major Mahama. Now we've lost 8 sons. How many more are we waiting for? There must be decisive action. It's non-negotiable. It is non-negotiable. Because you just need to see the pain and anguish these families are going through. And if as a country we fail to act, God will not forgive us.
Let's give ourselves some timelines. How long must this happen?
I
believe
expect,
from where
I
we
can't
sit,
give
you have some
timelines, but I expect some. And Kofi Omani had been doing excessive work. I mean, in the forest reserves, water bodies, he had been there were active operations, and Erastus kept reporting the operations that the military was carrying out, deep in the forest, actions he was taking. I expect that his blood and that of the others would act as the galvanizing factor to make sure that we execute this. There are no excuses. I wish I could give timelines. I don't have control. But when it comes to things that I have control over, I can give timelines. I'm able to give you a 30-day on something. I'm able to give you a 7-day or something. But on this, I don't have direct control. But I expect that there will be, once we lay them to rest on Friday, our focus, the pain we feel must be translated into drive. That pain must become anger. That pain must become tunnel vision. We must channel the national grief into a national call to action to end Galamsey. I repeat again, I don't care whose ox is God. I don't care if it's an NDC person or an NPP person. I think that, and I've said this before, I said this under the previous government, I'll repeat it. Galamsey is Ghana's version of the cocaine cartels. The only way to deal with it is to wage an all-out war. And I expect us to do so in memory of all who have died because of Galamsey.
Sam George Nati, thank you very, very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
On the Super Morning Show.
The other thing I want you to do in memory of Dr. Edward Kofi Omani-Boama, Dr. Mutala and the others, especially for Omani-Boama, you now sit in a seat at the Ministry of Communications. Everything we must use that ministry to do to advance national development, you must do it. If you don't do it, you are not only disappointing citizens, you are disappointing your brother and your friend. So you must do everything you can to make that ministry an excellent ministry to give us all the best results that we are looking for.
So help me God.
Amen.